Hello and welcome to Addicted to Lacrosse. This is Season 5, Episode 18. Today is Sunday, April the 15th, 2018. My name is Graham Perro. With me, as always, are Melissa Daphne and Tyler Fitch. This actually is Episode 18. I believe in last week's show I said it was Episode 16 and it was actually Episode 17. So I went through the math again and this is actually Episode 18. So we got a bunch to talk about. A couple of items of news from the league. Which I'm going to classify under my awesome list. And we'll get to that quickly. And then we have 5 games to talk about and some predictions for last week. Some of us did really well and others not so much. And then we have 3 games to predict for next week as well. But we will start off with a brief conversation from a comment from our old buddy Anthony Garcia, who left a comment on last week's show, and the question was, when will either league, MLL or NLL, do something about the overlap in schedules? Now, this is something we've talked about in the past, and we could probably talk for a half an hour easy on, but we've got lots to talk about, so we'll just get to this briefly, and of course the answer is, who knows? I'm a little more optimistic that something positive will happen in the next couple of years than I have been in the past, only because with the previous administration, George Daniel at the helm, it seemed that the MLL was something the NLL didn't even want to acknowledge existed, and vice versa. Neither league ever wanted to talk about each other. They would certainly not try to do anything that would benefit the other. So it was just any decision the NLL made that might have any positive or negative effect on the MLL, it seemed that they'd go the negative route just for the sake of doing it. That may not be exactly the case, but that's certainly how it looked. They didn't give a crap about the other league, either one. It seemed, I guess I'm a little more optimistic that with Nick Sakevich at the helm, he's not going to go by all that, well, we've had problems in the past, or they made this decision in 1996 that caused us to have problems, or whatever it was. He's just to ignore all that crap and just say, okay, what's best for my league? And if what's best for my league is to have a partnership with that other league, then that's what we'll do. And I have a lot more confidence that Sakevich will do that than the previous guy. So could it happen next year, 2 years, 3 years from now? Possibly. I don't see it all happening at once. I can see maybe the NLL saying, okay, well, we'll move our playoffs back a little bit if you guys move your start date up a couple of weeks. And, maybe the next year they'll do something else or something. But it could happen. There's been no signs that that's going to happen. But like I said, I'm a little more optimistic that may happen at some point in the future. Tyler, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Who was a lead advertiser on the Mammoth game this weekend? The Denver Outlaws of the MLL. So wheels are in motion in a positive direction.
Nice.
Who moved their schedule up a month to finish sooner? The NLL. So that the players can be released for their summer leagues. Positive steps by the NLL. And finally, who has a new commissioner? It's actually the MLL, and Sakevich has said he's going to try and talk to them and make things happen. I think with the NLL's growth, their choice to move their season, well, not their choice, they were kind of forced because the MLL moved up, but they're going to have more teams, more opportunities for players to play, more games, more paychecks to collect. I think that the NLL wants this based on their actions of starting sooner and growing and having more teams. And I think they're a little more player friendly than the MLL, where they don't have a union or any kind of those things. So I think things will happen, and that right now the NLL is making all the moves to try and bridge this gap and have some harmony. Melissa, what about you?
It would definitely be nice to see them actually work together a little bit, because the games are very different. And so some people only like one or the other, but there's a lot of fans that like both. There's a lot of players that play for both. That competition between them really only hurts the fans and the players. It really doesn't help grow the game. And for all of us fans of this nice little sport that we call lacrosse, and box lacrosse especially, we need to do what we can to help grow that sport. And as we've talked about, it also crosses over with the WLA season and the OLA. So, I mean, there's a lot of issues with it. It would be really nice to see these leagues start to cooperate a little bit, work together a little bit, because it really is. It's all about growing the sport that we love, not necessarily just going head to head and trying to take the other guy down, because nobody wins in that instance. So it would be nice to see them start cooperating a little bit. Do you have anything else, Graham?
No, I guess that's it. It certainly would be nice to see these two cooperate. Their seasons do overlap a little bit, but other than that, you would think that each one would want the other, like each one should be advertising for the other, and basically everybody wins. I mean, if you're at an NLL game and you see things saying, "Hey, our season's almost over," but you can check out these teams and they, it's the same players and it's kind of the same game, but it's a little different. So it'll be fun for you. So go check them out. And the same thing for the MLL. They'll say when our season's over, well, you'll have to wait a few months, but then you get the NLL. And there just seems to be so much more that they could do together than they could do apart. And at some point, I imagine they'll figure that out.
Well, I know in Denver that's a little complicated just a little bit, because you have two different ownership groups, because Pat Bolin, who owns the Broncos, also owns the Outlaws, and then you have Stan Kroenke, who owns a few other teams and around the league, and the Pepsi Center. And so you definitely have two very competitive people that are straight on head to head. But yeah, we all want to grow the game. We want to get more people playing, more fans. It's so frustrating, because I know, and we've definitely talked about, like Graham said, that it's hard when it's like, oh, do I go to the Mammoth playoffs or do I watch the Outlaws home opener? Because the Outlaws, especially, their season is always home heavy on the opening part of the season, because they play at Invesco Field, which is home of the Broncos. So as we start nearing football season, that means they can't be on the field because, well, Broncos will not allow that. And so when I had season tickets, I basically wasn't able to go to the first 4 games. Well, I basically missed most of the season at that point. So what's the point? So yeah. Sorry. Just step back in there.
All right, let's move on to our news of the week. And actually, we'll start with this shorter one first. We talked about this last week, about the fact that teams were playing music during play, and when their team was on defense, the music would be quiet. When their team was on offense and the visiting team was on defense, the music was cranked up. And it looks like the NLL has decided that sucks, as we did. And so the NLL has actually warned teams that they will be paying attention to the music volume. This is something I think it was Teddy Jenner that tweeted out. No, sorry, it was Brad Challoner. My mistake. They will be paying attention to the music volume and, quote, noting significant discrepancies in volume based on who has the ball. So if they see this happening or hear this happening, there will be repercussions, and who knows what those repercussions are. But the fact that there will be repercussions, I think, is significant. And I certainly didn't notice it at all during the Saskatchewan game this past weekend. Now, the music wasn't nearly as loud during the broadcast to begin with, so it's also possible that differences in volume I may not have noticed quite as much. But the music volume during the broadcast was much better this past weekend than it was the previous one. So hopefully going forward, that's just not something we will have to worry about. And speaking of broadcast, this is the news that I mentioned earlier that I was going to list under my awesomes. John Gertler, who's the play-by-play voice of the Bandits, he also writes a blog on the bandits.com website. And this week he mentioned that he has talked to the director or vice president or whoever it is of the league who's in charge of the broadcasts. And so there's some big news for next year. First off, and this is the awesome part, no arena video board feeds. So we will not be seeing the kiss cam. We will not be seeing the dance cam. We will not be watching the crowd while play is going on. None of that stuff. So that is awesome. I'm quite thrilled about that. They will have a dedicated producer, director, and a whole production team, cameraman, all that kind of stuff. They've upgraded the equipment, or they're going to be upgrading the equipment in all the arenas. We've already seen high def video come out of Rochester, which we never thought we would. And so the actual software that you see in the browser has changed in the last week or two as well. I haven't played around with it too much, but I know in the past, if you're watching it live, everything's fine. If you try to go back 30 seconds or back a minute just to see what was going on, sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes getting back to the live feed is problematic. It looks like that's been cleaned up. And if they have the whole off season to fix that, then we could have some pretty good stuff next year. So better quality feeds, better video feeds, better sound, no kiss cam, and producers and directors who are paying attention to the game and the broadcast and not worrying so much about what the people that are actually in the arena can see, because that's somebody else. So I think this is great news. Yeah, so what do you guys think? Tyler, we'll start with you again.
This is a great way for the league to spend money. And I think the biggest thing we'll get out of this is when they do replays and they want to have like the side-by-side of overhead when the ball crosses the line and corner shot when the person is actually landing in the crease, with not using the in-house person, but somebody who's trained to do this, they'll be able to do things like that. I think that's something, I don't think that's the reason they're doing this. They want overall better production quality of not crowd shots during important moments. But that's another thing that they'll be able to gain from this. So it's another easy way to have fought for the approval that they got. So I'm excited for this. Melissa, what do you think?
This is awesome. I mean, we've definitely complained more than once on the show about why are we watching the crowd when some crucial play is going on, when the seconds are winding down or it's overtime? Why am I watching the crowd? So yeah, this is awesome. I think a lot of fans are going to be really happy. And I understand why we were getting that feed. It makes sense. It's because it was easy for them to digitize it. But there's nothing worse than sitting there going, what just happened? I have no idea because I'm watching Kiss Cam or crowd shots or something. So yeah, this is awesome. And we've definitely complained about the quality of some of the arenas, so it would be nice if some of that's upgraded. And not just upgraded, that maybe there's some continuity between the arenas. So that way you're not saying, well, in Rochester, you're never going to get that overhead shot. Or in Saskatchewan, you're only going to have these shots. Like, it would be nice that, okay, no matter which arena you're at, you have the exact same options. And so, yeah, I'm really excited. And as Graham already noted, I definitely noticed that last weekend we had the skip forward or back 15 seconds, which we were wishing for before. So I'm very happy about some of the changes they're making. This is awesome. So back to you, Graham.
All right, so we've started off on a pretty good note. Let's get to the games of the week, and I'll just cover those quickly. We had Rochester over Toronto on Friday night, and Saskatchewan beating Vancouver 20-10. Looked like Saskatchewan was going to run away with that fairly early, and they were talking about the 24-7 game earlier in that broadcast, and I guess the Rush didn't quite get there. Then on Saturday night, we had New England over Colorado in a low-scoring match. Calgary and Buffalo were fairly deadlocked until they weren't, and then Calgary went off for a 16-9 victory there. And Georgia won the second rematch of last year's championship game Saskatchewan beat Georgia earlier this year, and then Georgia got revenge on Saturday. So on to the awesome and not awesome stuff of the weekend. And I will go first. And my first awesome of the week, is the Rush and the Swarm. Both teams wore jerseys to honor the Humboldt Broncos. The Rush's jerseys, instead of having the player's name, just said Humboldt, and the Swarm said Broncos in the same place. So the players' names actually weren't on the jerseys at all, I don't think. And then all of the game-worn jerseys, as well as jerseys for other players who didn't actually play in the games, I believe anyway, are being auctioned off on eBay this week. All proceeds are going to the families of the Humboldt Broncos. So you can go to nll.com/Humboldt, and that will redirect you off to the eBay site. We will put that in the show notes if I remember to do that. But the bidding is going on until this coming Saturday morning. So you've still got 5 days as of the time we're recording this to get in your bids, and hopefully you have a deep pocketbook, because some of them are going for a fair bit of money. I think they all started at $50, and these are American prices for those of you listening in Canada, because we had the game in Canada and they're probably being shipped from Canada, but it's all run by the NLL, which is based in the US, so it's American money. But in any case, I think they all started at $50, and most of them are in the $200 to $300 range now. Some of the bigger names are $600 or $700. I think I was looking at them earlier. Jeremy Thompson is about $870. Mark Matthews was $830. Church 100, Robert Church $660. So they're all, some of the big names are a fair bit of money, but it's all going to a good cause. So if you can afford it, go right ahead. And the fact that they're doing this, the fact that Georgia was all in on it as well. I mean, we understand why the Rush is doing it, but Georgia had no problems with it as well, and their jerseys are all for sale as well. And so the fact that they're all doing this is pretty awesome. So that's my first one. And let's switch directions and go to Melissa.
All right. So I'm actually going to piggyback on that comment, because like we talked about last week, just the way the lacrosse community is really coming out for Humboldt. I love the fact that the Russian Swarm, not only that both teams were participating for the jerseys, because that's really cool. Usually you just have the home team doing it. And then you also had the Vancouver Stealth doing something. I just really love the way the community is coming out, and we've seen it several times. So it's not even just, this one instance. There's so many instances over the years. You know, the Mammoth had their Lacrosse Out Cancer weekend, which I don't know what it is. They have an issue with the Lacrosse Out Cancer blackout nights, but that's a whole other story. But I just really love how the community comes out and they really try and do what they can. I know when I do the Polar Plunge for Special Olympics, I have several people support me in that. And so it really warms my heart just to see how the community really comes together for these things. And so I think that's just really awesome. And I really wish I had some deeper pockets so I could get one of these jerseys to add to my massive collection, but doesn't look like that's going to be an option because there is some heavy bidding. What about you, Tyler? What's your first awesome?
Yeah, we're all on the same page. I also have the jerseys from Saskatoon, as well as the Mammoth doing the Lacrosse Out Cancer Night. Stealth had their BC jerseys with all proceeds going to Humboldt. So like across the league, it was a strong theme this weekend. So I busted out one of my jerseys, the Jeff Zwicky Pink in the Rink night from Everett. Yeah. They did Everett. They always did bidding in person, and there's this group of 4 kids that told my wife they were going to outbid her for the Zwicky jersey, and she just laughed at them. And they're like, "Oh, we can't go against that lady," so they went and found something else. That's a good memory from a game. But across the league, everybody pulling together. The Stealth BC jerseys, I really love them because they're so radically different than anything they regularly wear. Like the Pink in the Rink was just the Stealth jersey with some variation. Though they did that, it's still just the basic Washington logo. But BC jerseys, it's the flag, it's different, and they didn't do that for the longest time. So I really love those jerseys. And I don't know, I think that keeping the Humboldt tragedy in the front of everybody's mind, and saying we got to take care of these people, and they are, and they can do it pretty quickly. I mean, it's not just like game jerseys in Saskatoon are they just said this is for Saskatoon. Like, no, we're gonna change the names on all the branding, on not the branding, but the names on the back of every single one, which takes time and effort. They either had extra jerseys and make them up, or they had to change the jerseys, but it wasn't a minor feat that they were just doing the quick and easy thing. They did a dedicated thing for that team and those kids and their families. Not that they get the jerseys, but they get the proceeds. So yeah, that was a great, awesome thing that we saw this weekend from multiple teams. Graham, back to you.
All right. One other thing that the Rush did was they repainted the boards around the rink, and it had Humboldt Broncos. I believe it had the names of all the people. I don't know if it was all the people on the team or if it was all of the people who were killed in the accident. But in any case, the fact that they repainted the entire boards, which meant removing advertising, and I don't know if the Rush ate that cost or if they went to their advertisers and said, "Look, for this game, we want to do this, and we want you guys to donate your the fact that we're going to take your company's logo off the boards." But in either case, somebody ate that cost, and that was cool. So I thought that was also awesome. My next awesome, we'll get to the Rock game on Friday night. And for full details, you can see my blog. I did a full awesome, not awesome article on that whole game. So I'll just touch on a couple of them here. And so the awesome is the Rock offense in the first half. Tom Schreiber was back, and he looked like Tom Schreiber. Dan Lintner and Reed Reinhold also played really well. So a week after they had no goals at all scored by the offensive players, they had a game where all the goals were scored by offensive players. They didn't have a single transition goal. So that was a little weird. They didn't play quite as strong in the second half, but the Rochester defense played very well as well. So part of it was that. But for the awesome part, I'm going to stick with the first half and just say the Rock offense looked pretty darn good in the first half. Melissa, what's next?
So mine's a little personal, but going really awesome with my picks last week. So I'm going to say, well, yeah, these games were a bunch of upsets or something, but it's kind of what I picked. So I can't even say that. So it's just a good weekend of games. What about you, Tyler?
Graham and I are on the same page a lot today. I had Tom Schreiber specifically. He missed 8 weeks of playing time. I don't know. He missed a lot, and he came back and had 3 goals in the first half, and he was kind of doing what he wanted. And the team, the Rock as a whole, like, they had a little more pep in their step. Like, everybody's like, "Oh, thank goodness he's here." And he makes a huge difference to the team. I don't know if it was an issue of being in game shape for his second half taper off, or if the Rochester's like, "Oh yeah, I got to guard that guy," and then they just started doing it. Like one spot in the fourth quarter, I was watching possession, and they really had him locked off separate. Like whatever was happening didn't matter. We're guarding that guy. And when it was 10-10 and the Rock didn't get any more goals, like the in-game adjustments like that can make all the difference. And maybe Rochester made that adjustment, but it's good to see the old Captain America back. Hear Andy McNamara make his call. He was so happy. "Oh, Captain America!" And he loves it when he scores a goal. You don't get to hear most of that, Graham, because you're at the game, but it's
true enough.
You can hear the smile on his face. Okay, back to you.
All right, and just to clarify something, Tom Schreiber had 4 goals in the first half, not 3.
See, I was looking at this game sheet, and I thought he had 4, but then he had like 4 for the game, and one of them said it was in the third quarter. I think the game sheet's wrong.
Yeah, because Toronto scored 3 goals in the second half. Adam Jones had 2 in the third, and Dan Taylor had 1 in the fourth, and that was it for the second half.
Yeah, so I wanted to say
sorry, I was just say I know when I was writing my sports column, there was a lot of times that I was making as meticulous notes as I possibly could, and there was a few times that I looked at the game sheet and went, wait a sec.
Yeah, the bottom half says he has 4-1, but he has 5. So that one that's marked with the ups, I don't even know what that is, but maybe they don't have a system that tracks that down. I totally thought he had 4 in the first half, but then I said 4-1 and he had 1 in the second half, and
he had 4 goals in the first half and 1 assist in the second half. Maybe that's what they meant.
No, at the ninth Rock goal says Tom Schreiber and has in parentheses ups versus extra attacker or empty net. I don't even know what's going on there. No, that was a penalty shot that didn't go in. That was the
penalty shot that he didn't score. So
unsuccessful penalty shot is probably what
that's what that would be. Yep.
Thanks, NLL.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, I think we're back to me now. My next and final awesome for the week is Calgary. And that's nothing to do with the actual game itself, which they won. So good job, Calgary. They had 17,000 plus at that game, the highest attended game of the year for any team. And the 50-50 draw, and I think this is kind of par for the course for Saskatchewan, but I don't think Calgary gets up here. The 50-50 draw raised over $100,000. And that was a night after the Rock 50-50 draw raised $7,500, something like that, which is kind of typical for the Rock. They're somewhere in that area. I think they had it up to 10,000 once, which is crazy. Pardon me. But Saskatchewan usually gets up into the 80 to 100 to 120,000, some insane amount of money. But the fact that Calgary got there as well was pretty cool. And it's nice to see those kind of attendance numbers in Calgary. So that's pretty awesome. Melissa.
Okay, so mine's totally generic, but I'm just loving the fact that we still don't fully know what's going to go on with the playoffs in the East. It's so crazy that we didn't get Graham's prediction, but with the 8-8, but it is just such a close race that it's really exciting to watch this come down to the wire. And there's been some seasons where it has not been this way, where it's very clearly this is first, this is second, this is third on both sides, and it's like there's maybe a battle for that final spot. But this is just really fun to watch. I love the fact that we still don't know, although I'm sure some of the East Coast fans are like, oh my God, I hate this. And maybe if it was my side, I would probably be thinking the same thing, because I've been in those seasons where you're on the edge of your seat biting your nails going, I don't know if my team's going to make it to the playoffs this year. But for just a fan that is on the sidelines, I'm kind of loving this. So what about you, Tyler?
I'm also loving that. It's super exciting to see what happens. But my last awesome for the week is in Langley. It was kind of a kid night where your kid wears a jersey, they get in free. Some little girl wore a plaid, just like Melissa, Lumberjacks jersey. And the jersey's 10 years old. Like they did 2008 season when they had the one year they had Dan Dawson. Like I guess it's 11 seasons old because the whole start from 0 + 1. Anyways, but they only wore them once. And like Melissa still has hers. That kid has theirs all this time later, which had to be a hand-me-down because like she was less than 10. She wasn't even alive when the game happened, best I could tell. But it's such an iconic jersey and total beauty. I love seeing it in the crowd up there. So that was my last awesome. Graham, any more for you?
No more, but I didn't clarify thing. You said they only wore it once. Do you mean they only wore it for one single game or one season?
One game.
It was only one game. Wow, yeah. That's pretty cool. Because I remember that jersey as well. I remember seeing it during the game going, okay, that's pretty cool.
I cannot remember them wearing it in 2009 season at all. They wore it once in 2008. I remember this because it was the year they had Dan Dawson. So that's kind of how that make that association in my head. And I don't remember them wearing it in 2009 at all. Like they may have worn it one more time because man, it was so awesome, but I don't think so.
It is absolutely one of my most favorite jerseys. So it's hard to believe it was only once because it really was a cool jersey. And it's so fit. They could have totally went with something like that for their normal team jerseys, and it would have been awesome. Loved it.
No, they had those white pajamas instead. White on white are just awful.
Yeah, they did look like pajamas. Kind of like when the Blazers did it too.
All right. My first not awesome for the week, I guess, is kind of bookending my previous awesome, and that's the Rock offense in the second half of the game. As I mentioned, they only scored 3 goals. Adam Jones had a couple. Dan Taylor scored his first as a Rock, and it was a very nice goal, actually. But that was it. Brett Hickey was a healthy scratch, and I was late to the game. I arrived like 15 seconds or something after the opening face-off. So I didn't actually hear that Hickey was the scratch. So it was halfway through the first quarter, and I'm like, I haven't seen him yet. Where the heck is he? And I'm looking on the bench. I'm looking on the floor. I couldn't find him. Turned out he was a healthy scratch. Probably because they looked at Dan Lintner and said, okay, well, we can't make him the healthy scratch anymore. Not after scoring 5 goals last week. So no Hickey. Hellier had 0 goals again. I thought he played okay. He had 4 assists. It's not like he was completely invisible, but he didn't score. And this is the first time in his career that he's gone 3 straight games with 0 goals. Adam Jones had gone 2 straight games with 0 goals, but in the third quarter he scored a couple, and he looked okay as well. Tom Schreiber kind of vanished in the second half, but like you said, Tyler, they were probably just swarmed all over him, and they kind of said, given what we've seen Hellier and Jones and the guys do over the previous couple of weeks, if we take Schreiber out and make sure he's double teamed and make sure that he is not going anywhere, then we might be able to handle the rest of them. And that's basically what they did. So that was kind of disappointing after a strong start from the Rock in the first half. They kind of vanished in the second half, so that was not awesome. Melissa, what's up with you? And you're muted.
There we go, unmute. I'm a noisy, fidgety person, so I always mute that. So my first not awesome, we're going to kind of kick back to last week and touch on one of my not awesomes from last week. So we did get a comment that kind of got shuffled a little bit from Casey Guerin. Do you know how to pronounce it, Graham?
Casey Guerin.
Guerin. Okay, so one of the Rush broadcasters who was a little upset with one of my comments, which, okay, was probably justified. But he said it was not a huge deal, but it'd be nice if we criticize things that actually happened. He said that they only said it once. Well, I would disagree. I think it was more than once. I'm not going to go through and, here's the timestamp of every time. But I will also admit that sometimes when I'm grading papers, because I teach college, I can get a little irritable. And so I would say the truth of my not awesome from last week probably falls somewhere in the middle. That it was definitely more than once or twice, but maybe it wasn't as bad as it was grating on my nerves, and part of that was because I was grading. So that is my not awesome, is that I was a little cranky last week, and so I am owning up to that maybe I was a little harsher than I intended. So that is my not awesome. What about you, Tyler?
Sure. My first not awesome is, well, I'm going to label this week the anti-Koenig ref play of the week. They have whatever special deal they have with the league to recognize when the refs get it right. But in the second half of the Toronto game, hey, Kitty, there was 2 dead ball situations where I felt that players were touching the ball and picking up after the whistle, which should be a delay game, but they weren't. The first one specifically I'm going to talk about is Toronto had possession, get a shot that goes wild, horn blows, Reid Reinhold picks up the ball for Toronto in front of their bench, Jake Riddlers runs by and checks it down to get the ball loose so they can, because it's not his ball, it's not Reinhold's ball, it's not Toronto's ball, and they ding up Withers for a dead ball penalty. when Reinhold was the one that picked the ball up after the whistle. And when they started enforcing this rule, I mean, they were on people so close. Like if you nudge the ball and it wasn't your possession, it was delay a game. And Reinhold picked up the ball after the whistle, and it wasn't his ball, and they give Withers the penalty. I thought they blew that call. And then they had a similar one a couple minutes later, another after the whistle touching of the ball that affected it enough that it was worth mentioning. And so that was my anti-Koenig ref play of the week, or Koenig anti-ref play of the week, but we're not having any sort of Koenig sponsorship. Anyways, Graham, up to you.
All right, I only have one more, and that is Buffalo. I only saw parts of this game. I was actually kind of switching back and forth between the Buffalo game and the Colorado game, and the Saskatchewan game, so I was bouncing between all three of them. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I have a bit of a cough that's bouncing back and forth here. It mostly goes away, but when I start talking, it comes back, so my apologies. I'm not one of these people who can have 3 games going all at once and pay any attention to any of them. So I have to pick one and just watch it. And then sometimes when it goes to, a quarter ends or they go to halftime, then I'll switch to a different game. But I know some people have, one game on their phone and one game on their laptop and one game on their tablet or something. And they're actually somehow watching all 3. And I cannot figure out how to do that. But anyway, Buffalo seemed to keep themselves in this game for the first half, and it was going back and forth. It was tied a bunch of times. I actually meant to bring that up. So there it is. So yeah, it was tied 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times in the first half. And then Calgary scored 10 in a row. And so the whole tie thing just went completely out the window. Buffalo didn't score for 23 minutes. And I haven't paid a lot of attention, but I seem to remember Buffalo fans talking about this a number of times this year, that they'll be in a game for a while and then they'll give up this huge run. And then after that, it kind of doesn't matter whether they're in the game or not because they've already lost it. So Buffalo played really well in the first half. The long Calgary goal streak was when I had switched to a different game, so I didn't actually see any of it. But I did look at the score at one point and go, wait a minute, wasn't this game like really close a few minutes ago? And now suddenly Calgary's leading by 7. So the fact that Buffalo was in it for a while and then just kind of stopped in the second half, kind of like a different team I have mentioned earlier. Yeah, not awesome. Melissa, what's next? Do you have another one?
Yeah, Colorado. I don't know what happened to him this weekend. It's just we start nearing the playoffs and all of a sudden their play seems to change. And then there's the blackout nights, or lacrosse out cancer as they call them now. It just, for whatever reason, they just seem to lose those games, and not by a small margin. They just seem to lose them really badly every year. So that's a little frustrating. What about you, Tyler?
Yeah, I feel like Graham's inside my head because everything matches. My question is not awesome. Is where was Buffalo's effort when they needed it? Like, they're the ones in that game fighting for a playoff spot that is not yet determined. They were tied for the East lead in games 1 at the start of the weekend, and they didn't take advantage to get ahead of everybody. So that was pretty bad. And slight tangent along with Graham. One game on the TV, one game on phone 1, one game on phone 2, all 3 games at once. That was rough, but I talked about it in a little tweet storm. I just don't see how that grows the game and helps people see all the great action when they're all at the same time. 3 games in the single time zone with it's pretty unlikely. Anyways, Buffalo, yeah. I don't fully buy into the concerns that you have, Melissa, around Alex Buque not being a great goalie, but he's not consistently there. Like every other week or whatever the reason is, like he just doesn't bring it. And
that's part of why I think he's not a great goalie that's ready for this spot, is his inconsistency.
Yeah, you got to bring it every time. And So maybe next weekend he'll have it back. Maybe he's better at home or something like that. It's tough, but they had a huge opportunity to maintain the lead in the East, and they blew it. So that's not awesome for them. Graham, any more not awesomes?
I am all out of not awesomes, actually. Melissa, do you have any left?
No, she said no. I'm reading her lips.
She shook her head.
But I remembered I had one more I forgot to write down. So
Okay.
I'm going to add in. I don't know if this is going to be somewhere between awesome and not awesome. Is I had a realization last night with the San Diego Seals coming. Stealth had the rights to Brendan Fowler and started playing him. Brendan Fowler lives in Newport Beach, California, like an hour from San Diego, maybe 2 hours because traffic. And the Stealth activated him. So now the Stealth have an active player who lives in the own backyard of San Diego who wants to play in the NLL and has good value as a face-off person, but not overall great value as a defensive player as well. So it's kind of a tough spot. But I realized, Stealth has activated Fowler, so like San Diego will take him as one of their picks. Like, beautiful. Like the season's like lost. Like they hadn't been eliminated from the playoffs at that point, but they were so far down. It's like we have a player we can activate, protect on our list, and San Diego will just take him because he lives right there and he's got NLL experience. I was like, that's great. And then I realized that San Diego can just call their bluff. Stealth can protect Fowler, and San Diego will be like, great, we won't pick him. He won't make your team next year, and then we'll get him for free when you release him. So I want to see how that plays out. So I don't know where that lies. This has created a thing in my head that I've picked up around what's going to happen there. Did they activate him so that San Diego would take him, and will San Diego call their bluff? Very interesting.
On a related note, if I'm not mistaken, Zach Greer lives in the Southern California area as well.
He moved to Texas.
Oh, he did?
Yes. So I don't know. I don't know whereabouts.
So maybe that's not as...
Yeah.
That may not be as big a deal. Because I remember thinking, okay, well, if Zach Greer lives in Los Angeles or somewhere in that area, he may be very interested in playing for a team near his home.
He totally
but if that's
did.
Not his home anymore, then that's different.
Until like this year. So it's a recent thing, but he was totally there.
All right. Okay, so we will move on to our predictions from last week. And like I said before, some of us did really well, some of us did not. In fact, it was time. Tyler and Melissa both went 4-1. Nice job, guys. Tyler missed the Toronto-Rochester game, and Melissa missed the Colorado-New England game because she picked her own team, which she rarely does, but she did this time. That cost you 5-0. But I went 2-3, missing Toronto, Colorado, and the second Saskatchewan game. So our season records now, Melissa, believe it or not, is still in the lead, as she has been all year, at 485 and 28. I'm right behind her at 41 and 32, and Tyler is behind me at 34 and 36. Look at that. We're all above 500.
No,
see, that was from the box commercial that you see on NLT.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll get on to our predictions for week 20, if you can believe that. The second last week of the season. There are only 3 games. And Melissa, as always, you can start us off.
Okay. So this first pick, it's funny because normally when I put when we do our game notes, I'm almost always the first one to put my picks. And for this weekend, it was so crazy. I was actually last. So I will admit my first pick because New England at Rochester. Gee. And so I will admit my pick is just a little bit to be contrary to my co-host because I'm the only one picking New England. So it's one of those things. Both these teams have a lot riding on the line, and they both play really well, and then they play really bad, and you never know which team's going to show up. So it's kind of a coin flip. So I will admit this pick really has nothing more than I'm being contrary to my co-hosts. Toronto at Buffalo, I'm going to go with Toronto for several of the reasons that actually Tyler was talking about with Buffalo. You just never know which bouquet is going to show up. we've seen Buffalo play really well, seen them play really bad. Same with Toronto, but Toronto's playing just a little bit more solidly to me. So I'm going to pick them. And with Calgary and Vancouver, unfortunately, the Stealth are just not having a good season. It was interesting seeing some player tweets around that, and not necessarily from Stealth players, but just some lacrosse tweets about the Stealth. And it's going to be interesting to see what changes they make, because I think we can all agree some changes need to be made, whether that's in leadership on the team, in coaching, both. There's definitely going to be some big changes, I think, next season. So that's my picks. What about you, Tyler?
Okay. Yeah, I think the hardest pick of the weekend is New England Rochester. I love Brett Manning and New England teams. So I always kind of have a soft spot there, but Rochester, a little more impressive. They get to be at home. New England's been on the road for a couple of weeks, so that kind of start wearing people down. So I'm going to pick Rochester there, but I think it's a tough one. Second game, also tough. And I feel maybe looking at the picks that I'm a little contrarian on this one, but Buffalo at home against Toronto. Toronto looked a lot better with Tom Schreiber back, but they're not clicking as a whole. And I think we'll get one of those games with no rhyme or reason that Bouquet has a good game and can shut them down. So I'm going to pick Buffalo there. Finally, Calgary, Vancouver. And how long can I silently shake my head before the auditing tool cuts it all out? Because silence isn't good for a podcast. But I'm sitting here shaking my head. And got to pick Calgary. They really have nothing to play for, but feels good to win. They get the BC players get to play at home in front of their friends and family that they don't regularly get to do, and they'll take advantage of that and beat the Stealth. Graham, what are your picks?
All right. New England Rochester, this was a tough one. I looked over this one for a little while, and both teams have played really well, particularly last week. But I happen to actually see one of them, so maybe that pushed me towards Rochester, because Matt Vince didn't play great until he was pulled. He was pulled early in the second quarter. He was off for about 30 seconds or something, and then he was back in, and he was a different guy. He was the Vince from his goalie of the year years, but he was a lot better once he went back in, and he was solid. The Rochester defense was solid. So maybe the fact that I've just seen them more recently in person than the Black Wolves, I'm going to pick Rochester. Toronto Buffalo, this was also tough, and I'm still not 100% sure if I'm picking this one with my head or with my rock fan heart. But Toronto's backs are against the wall. They have to win if they want to make the playoffs. I don't know the exact numbers because there's way too many tiebreakers to worry about, and I don't know the details of all the tiebreakers. I'm pretty sure Evan Schemenauer is putting something together for his column this week that will outline all the tiebreakers, and he's done that in his previous column. But the fact that we've got now one more week of games, and some of those tiebreakers are no longer meaningful because they can't be tied. But I did look over it earlier today, and this is a bit of an aside. There is possibility that Rochester will end up 10 and 8. 10 and 8? Yes, 10 and 8. And everybody else is 9 and 9. It's also possible for Georgia to be 10 and 8 and everybody else 9 and 9. And it's possible for New England to be 10 and 8 and everybody else 9 and 9. So we could still have 3 different 4-way ties in the East, each with a different team on top at 10 and 8. It's not possible for Buffalo or Toronto to end up 10 and 8. But either way, there's still crazy tiebreakers involved. So I don't know what Toronto's magic number is or anything like that before they're out. But the long and the short of it is they have to keep winning if they want to keep their playoff hopes alive. So given that, I'm going to go for Toronto and think once their backs are against the wall, they have to win, and they will. Calgary, Vancouver, same as the rest of the season so far, pretty much. If you pretty much pick against Vancouver, and you're mostly right. And that kind of sucks. And I had a bit of a conversation with somebody earlier this week saying, and I think we've said this on the show as well, Vancouver has not been playing for the most part like a 2-14 team. They've had some games where they were just blown out of the water, and every team has that. And maybe they've had more of those than others. But there's certainly been a number of games where they played very well and maybe just not quite as well as the other team. And Melissa has mentioned a couple times in the past, I don't remember if it was Albany or Anaheim or one of those teams that lost a whole whack of games, but all of them by 1 or 2 goals. It was just like they rarely got blown out. They just lost a whole bunch of games by a little bit. And that's kind of what I'm seeing for more so the second half of the season from the Stealth, that they weren't terrible for the most part. They just weren't quite as good as the other team. And a loss is a loss. It really doesn't matter whether you're terrible or not quite as good. But it does seem unfortunate that the players have put together some really good games and still lost them. So that kind of sucks. But in any case, it does mean that I'm picking Calgary this week, same as you guys. So I guess that will do it for another episode. Like I said, only 2 weeks left in the regular season, and then we get a couple of weeks of playoffs. 1 less week than previous because the second round is only 1 game. And we might actually have a winner by the end of May. So we'll see what happens there. So that will do it for another episode of Addicted to Lacrosse. For Tyler and Melissa, I'm Graham. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.